How's it going, everybody? My name is Antonio, and I'm on the barbecue this week with Tyrone Docherty, President and CEO of First Tellurium. Who's not with us today, though, is your financial advisor. This is going to be just a casual talk between two people who you've likely never met in your life. So, for as far as you as a listener or viewer are concerned, this is going to be a conversation that's general and impersonal in nature, as well as a conversation that will include no financial nor professional advice of any sorts. And it's also definitely not a conversation that you want to use as independent research, because it's also going to include a lot of forward-looking statements about uncertain events that may or may not happen in the future. And just in general, the mineral exploration, development, and mining industry is among the highest risk industries out there with the lowest chances of success. So if you care about your money and you don't like losing it, please do more research by visiting setter.com and analyzing the company's official filings, as well as consult a professional investment advisor before, of course, wearing your big boy pants in the end and taking your own decision. That all said, First Tellurium is a $10 million tellurium and precious metals exploration company listed on the CSE under the ticker symbol FTEL. The company has 86.5 million shares outstanding, which makes it an 11-cent stock at the time of recording of this video. There are some options and warrants on it, though, and that means that the total number of shares outstanding of the fully diluted shares, is about 120 million. This is the first time I'm interviewing a Tellurium company, so for those of you who are like me, not specifically in the know, Tellurium is actually not a metal. It's a metalloid. It's called a metalloid because it's actually, a metalloid is also called a semi-metal because it possesses the properties of a metal, but it also possesses properties of a non-metal. So tellurium in this case is particularly primarily used in solar panels and other green economy technologies, basically, given that it offers greater conductivity when it's exposed to light. And the metalloid mostly occurs in mineral deposits as a byproduct. So that's something that I'm curious about here as well. I took an interest after watching the metal run about 30% in the last 52 weeks. And so I called up First Tellurium, and here we are today. Now, First Tellurium as a company, though, is also the first company that I've ever heard of being an official federal lobbyist, which allows the company to work closer with governments in Canada and the US to fund critical metals projects, among which, of course, tellurium projects, which is a critical metal. The company has two main projects. One of them is up in BC. That's actually really the flagship property here. It's called the Deerhorn Project. That was the previous name of the company too, by the way, Deerhorn Capital. And so First Tellurium owns 50% of it, with an option to increase the ownership to 75%. This is a relatively big property, actually. It's a 5,000 hectare property. That's about 51 square kilometers, I think. And it's a gold, silver, and a tellurium project, as well as there's even a potential for a copper porphyry that's recently being discovered there. So the companies follow up on it this year, and we're probably going to hear more about that in this conversation, but also later on in the year. Now, the Deerhorn property had a PEA done on it in 2018. It was actually using different numbers, of course. Everything was different back then. It was using $1,300 gold, $17 silver, $30 copper, and so on and so forth. And so using that, it came out at an after-tax NPV of $36.5 million and an IRR of 42% with a capex of $28.3 million. Do note, however, other things were different back then as well. Okay, that they used a 5% discount rate on it, and interest rates have gone up dramatically ever since. And so have, by the way, the prices of the underlying metals and materials that will be used to build a mine, if this was to become a mine. So this PA may not be representative of the reality on the ground today, but that is something that I hope to discuss today with Tyrone here. Now, interestingly enough, this PEA only covers about 20% of the known zone, okay? And it's even on a much smaller part of the overall property. So there is potential for other metals there. There's been talks for tungsten, molybdenum, and zinc on the property. And the company also believes there is, as I said, sort of a feeder zone to some of these metals, which they think is a deeply buried copper porphyry. So that's also going to be part of the discussion today. Now, other than this property, other than the Deerhorn property, down in the U.S., the company has a project in Colorado. It's called the Klondike property, which is also a tellurium prospect that is potentially going to get drilled this year, or at least so are a lot of people out there hoping, and they recently staked more ground around it. First Tellurium is also involved in other projects, sort of non-mineral exploration projects, but they announced earlier this year that they have established and hold a controlling interest in a thermoelectric technology-focused research, development, and commercialization company that wants to, do R&D basically on tellurium and look for new uses for the metalloid, as well as develop improved thermoelectric generators. That's what they say they're going to try and do there. That could also be used in the renewable energy and automotive industries, basically. So the company, by the way, also recently bought their own drill to lower the, life of exploration costs and be able to drill more quickly, which is not something I hear all too often. And what I also don't hear all too often is that I should keep talking, and I mostly hear the opposite, that I should shut up. So I think it's time for me to shut up now and welcome Tyrone, the CEO. Tyrone, thank you for investing your time with me.
Oh, it's great to be here. I love the way you had a good rundown for the company. I was amazed that you've done all that research. My hat's off to you.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine, by the way. And it's an overview. I try not to do it concisely. What did I miss in it, though? Did I say something wrong? Did I miss something important?
Well, no, the only thing I would suggest is that you sort of skipped over that we do have a third element to ourselves, and the fact that we own 49% of a First Nations company called Chiona Metals, which is working on some placer gold operation called Salmon Gold, which the gold is sold at a premium to two U.S. corporations, and the premiums then reinvested into the placer operation, the stream, the river, whatever, and introduce salmon to it. And then no one's allowed to mine it again. So the project is called Salmon Gold, and the two U.S. corporations that are buying it are Tiffany and Company and Apple. So it took about three and a half months for Apple to find out who we were. This is like 5 years ago, because they didn't want to get involved in a junior company that might have quote unquote Yahoos or whatever they're running, which is not unheard of. They checked out our background, and obviously I had a very successful background before this one, and they felt comfortable. So we worked with the First Nations with the placer mining, as well as other opportunities with the First Nations. It's not a big part of what we do, but it's why people are looking at it as far as quote ESG or whatever the case is. We sort of set the example for a junior company. So didn't want to really talk too much about it, but we are very diversified, and no one else is doing what we're doing on that aspect.
Why are Tiffany and Co? I assume the jewelry.
Yes. Tiffany Company and well, it's them looking that they want to get ethically sourced gold, right? And so by us working with the placer miners in Yukon, now we got the rights to the rest of Canada. There's also an operation in Alaska, and they work with the placer miners, making sure that they do things properly, rehabilitate the area after they finish mining, and then we introduce fish and other wildlife and turn it into a refuge, if you will. And so they believe they want ethically sourced stuff. So as a matter of fact, I believe Apple's got a blockchain showing where it comes from, just if investors want to know. So it was a big feather in our cap, although it's not a main thing what we're doing. It just goes to show people that there's big corporations out there looking to get ethically sourced minerals. And the fact that we also work with First Nations, it shows people that we're more than just a one-trick pony, if you will. We're not just mining per se. We're taking care of the land and being good stewards. And we make a little bit of money off it. Not a lot, but a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the point, or mostly, maybe not with this property, but I guess we'll get into more of these things as we move on forward. But your name, you changed your name to First Tellurium, so you're leading pretty heavily into the whole tellurium sector. Why are you even targeting this obscure market? What's sort of the game plan here?
Well, it came to our attention a few years back at how important tellurium was at that time, and how much more important it's getting going forward. And it took a smart marketing guy to give us a suggestion. He's been very successful in the mining industry for years. And he said, I'll give you 2 bits of advice if you want. He says, why don't you change your name from Deerhorn Capital to First Tellurium? Because what does Deerhorn Capital mean, our previous name? Are you a bank? What do you do? He says, if you are the only one with tellurium, then you probably should be out there letting people know that you have it, even though it's not our main mineral. But it's what separates us from everyone else. And as we speak today, there is no other junior that I'm aware of that has been focusing on getting tellurium properties. So we're far ahead of the game, and that's why I make the joke that maybe we should change our name from First Tellurium to First and Only Tellurium. So we've had an advantage for a number of years, and the demand for tellurium is going to increase more than the supply is there. And now there's other industries that could benefit from tellurium as well. So it sets us up great going forward.
You're Is the idea then to sell the property that you have also to like a tech company or someone who, or do you want to mine this yourself? How do you see the future?
Well, that's the beauty of it, Antonio. We got so many options available to us that really we sort of like we're like the house in the casino, right? Is the fact that we're not beholden to one industry, which makes it great. We're not beholden to one mineral, which makes it great. For example, the tellurium might represent 10, but more likely 5% of our total value. So if tellurium went to a zero, which is not going to happen, but if it went to zero, it would have very little effect on us because we're a high-grade gold silver company. But what makes us different is that by having this critical metal, and it's listed in both the US and Canada as a critical metal, and no other junior has it, then people that are going to need it, and they're lining up, people that need it, you say, okay, who do we want to? So I've told people all along, my opinion, and again, it's not the corporate overview, it's my opinion, is that I think we're going to get bought out before we go into production. I just don't know, is it going to be a solar company that needs tellurium for their cadmium tellurium solar panels? Is it going to be a battery company with this new fabulous lithium tellurium battery that's been patented by the University of British Columbia, which I've been told is far superior to a lithium ion battery? So will be someone that needs tellurium for the lithium tellurium battery? Is it going to be someone that needs it like ourselves for this new thermoelectric device that we're working on, these inventions? That, thermoelectrics actually is the second largest industry user right now of tellurium. Solar panels is first with 40%, thermoelectric. So that's it. Or is it going to be, if in fact we can prove up a large copper deposit, will it be a copper company that comes to buy us out and take over the whole mountain? I don't know. It's nice to be in a position, as I tell people, as you know, Antonio, if you're selling real estate, is it better to have one potential purchaser or a dozen? Obviously, it's better, the more you have, the better it is. And I hearken myself, and perhaps your viewers should know, is that, a lot of the thing you have to figure out, what's the history of the management going forward. So my last company, and by the way, Antonio, I only run one company at a time. I'm amazed when I go to some mining shows and I see some guys are presidents of 2, 3, 4 companies. So they must be much smarter than me. It's tough enough to do one company if you do it properly, right? So my last company was a company called Quinto Mining, Quinto, and I took it over in 1997. It had a market cap of $4 million. And I was lucky enough to sell it 11 years later for $175 million. And instead of taking cash, we took paper of the company called Consolidated Thompson Iron Mines. And so we ended up owning between 20 and 21% of them. And they sold their company 2.5 years later for $4.9 billion. So our enterprise value was around $1 billion. So it's not a bad start from 4 million. So that's how I build companies. I tell people, it's like the movie Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. Well, it's no different here. If you build the mining properly, people will show up. Big people will show up with real checks that don't bounce. So it's better to have people, multiple potential buyers, and then on the off chance that we don't get any offer that we think is reasonable, then as you referenced the PEA, we could put this into production on a small mines basis, 6 months of the year pulling ore off the ground, off the mountain, for a relatively cheap price. We'll just hire the miners that we have to do it. So the more that people come to see you that want to buy you out, they're going to tell you all the negative things about you, this, that, and the other. So if you can defeat all of their advances, say, well, no, that's not true. We got this covered, we got this covered, we got this covered. And by the way, you're not the only one knocking on the door. People have to make a decision soon what they want to do. For example, if you will, the tellurium market has been averaging for the last decade or so about 600 tons a year, tellurium. And China is the main supplier, just like every other rare metal. They supply 60% of the tellurium market worldwide. Now we know there's a bit of a trade struggle going on between China and the U.S. at the moment. That's why the Biden administration wants to get domestic supplies of critical metals and metals from friendly countries such as Canada. But leaving that alone, assuming things stay the same, the president CEO of First Solar, the largest U.S. solar company that happens to use cadmium tellurium, went on record about 18 months ago saying that First Solar alone is going to need somewhere between, starting next year, 2024, somewhere between 900 to 1,100 metric tons a year of tellurium. Now let's think about that for a sec. If the world market is 600 tons and First Solar themselves say they're going to need between 900 to 1,100 tons, where are they going to get it from? And then, in fact, if China stops the supply of tellurium, or the U.S. doesn't allow them to export tellurium to the U.S. for whatever reason, take 60 50% off in there, there's a huge deficit. And that doesn't take into account the fact that if these lithium tellurium batteries make it to the market by then, because they're allegedly far superior to lithium ion, that's a new market as well. So the demand is going to be great. So that's why I say anyone that needs a mineral such as ourselves, I don't know how long they're going to wait to find out, well, can we make a deal with these guys or not? Because someone, I would imagine, is going to want to talk to us if it's in such short supply. So we're in a great position as it is.
You say that you have a lot of potential purchasers, and I'm thinking, do you have a lot of potential purchasers, or do you have potential for potential purchasers? As in, are you talking to any parties?
If I am, I'm not allowed to discuss it. Okay, but I say the people have to put on their thinking cap or their logical cap, saying, okay, whether it's cobalt, graphite, lithium, that these are the minerals of the future. So people that have a supply of it, people are going to want to talk to them about it going forward. So if we're the only ones that have this critical metal called tellurium, which there's a huge deficit going on with First Solar's mentioned, that's with their expansion plans, and this new lithium tellurium battery, and maybe I should focus on that, especially for the Europeans who are much farther ahead of us in North America when it comes to the green life. I've been told by the University of British Columbia, and they've patented it, that there's 5 basic advantages of a lithium tellurium battery over a lithium ion battery. All right, number 1, much easier to charge. Number 2, lasts twice as long. Number 3, much more powerful, 4 to 10 times more powerful. That should have been the number 1, not number 3. Number 4, size-wise. Okay, here's your lithium ion battery. Okay, boom. And now you look at a lithium tellurium battery, which again has all these advantages, and you can measure between a thumb and a forefinger. So what does that do for weights for cars, automobiles, airlines, whatever the case is? And then the 5th and final advantage, which is probably the most important, or certainly one of the most important, is that it's a solid state battery, which means it cannot catch fire. Lithium batteries can and do catch fire. So I say to people, imagine if that was the only difference between the batteries, that it doesn't catch fire. I'm sure insurance companies and automobile companies would probably want to know what's going on, right? And we made a news release, I think it was middle of March of this year, that the mayor of New York, Mayor Adams, made legislation to talk about the lithium ion batteries because they're catching fire. One of the delivery drivers of a food, his bicycle exploded and caused a 5-alarm fire. And just last week, if you're following the big ship that left Holland, one of the EVs caught fire on the ship, destroyed all 3,000 cars, and the ship went down. And that's the second time in the last 4 or 5 months that that's happened. So if someone can produce a car that doesn't catch fire, the battery, I think we're in a good space. So the potential here is phenomenal. And then if you look at this, the thermoelectric company that we got 51% of, we were approached by a gentleman, an engineer out of Florida, who had a couple of inventions that he sold to the airline industry a few years ago. One of the 2 of the largest manufacturers in the world. I'm not allowed to say who it is, but and he called us because he believes his new thermoelectric can have a great enhancement on not only on solar industry but also on the automobile industry. Get the efficiency of the engine going much more from like 18%, which is current, to much higher levels. I'm not allowed to say which one until it comes out, but so that could be a new component there as well. And as I've said to my directors, and since I've said to them, we discussed with them that if in fact our mining property gets bought out, whether it's a copper company, whatever, we would flip out the thermoelectric once we got the prototypes and proves it can do what it does, because that's a different opportunity for us as well. So we're sitting in the great spot. And as I say to people, the best time my experience, the best time to sell something, Antonio, is when you don't have to, right? So unfortunately, there's a lot of juniors out there that are withering on the vine, and I feel sorry for them. So even if someone says, oh, I've got a great, let's call it graphite property. Okay, well, will it ever get to production? What's the economics of what happens to the price of graphite? No, ours is going to be driven by the precious metals and or the copper. So this is just a bonus that someone that needs it's going to want to line up to get hold of it, right? If you can't get it from China or from the U.S., or even the demand goes higher than what the supply system is now, where are you going to get it from? And that's why we're very good at what we do. And when we sold the last company, just to let put things in perspective, when we sold Quinto Mining, the negotiations lasted all of 10 minutes. Wasn't 10 months, wasn't 10 weeks, it wasn't 10 days, it was 10 minutes. We met at the golf course down at Atlanta, Georgia for the Masters golf tournament. We shared a house. They made an offer on the Saturday night. I counted it. They agreed. We shook hands, and that was it. And it was simple because they needed my property, and it was great for our shareholders, as the billion-dollar end value demonstrates. So I'm not a geologist or an engineer, Antonio. I don't go to bed at night dreaming of rock formations and assays. I'm just a businessman that says, how can I make the most money for myself and my shareholders with this asset that we have? And I should point out that I am the largest shareholder of First Tellurium. I do not sell. If you look at the insider reports, you'll see I haven't sold. The only time I have sold was when someone wanted to do a gypsy swap. They wanted to put money in my company, but they didn't want to hold their paper for 4 months. So I crossed some shares to them and put the money in and had the 4-month hold. So between myself and my wife, who's one of the largest shareholders, I think we control 11, 12, 13% of the company. When you throw in the warrants, it's probably 22, 23%. Like, I believe in what we have here. So I may come across as arrogant at times, Antonio. I hope yourself and your audience doesn't believe that. I just know what we're sitting on. I know we're different than 800, 900 other juniors that have to, kneel down to these big guys who dictate the terms. And I say no. As you'll see, I've participated in every financing the company's had for the last 2 or 3 years, probably longer, because I made a little bit of money on my last deal. And, if I have so be it. And we just don't take money from anyone. It's like, what are you going to do to help my company? And some of the big boys are kind of taking it back, like, well, who the hell are you? I said, well, I know where I'm sitting. I'm not giving this thing away. And if we have these potential multiple purchasers down the road that need it, I mean, it sort of sells itself. So I'm a little bit different. I know I've probably talked too long, but it's just how we view things and what we're sitting on, which is phenomenal.
Loads to unpack there. You're right about that. Let's maybe just sort of take it from the point of Tellurium and why Tellurium for you specifically. You said it's a marketing thing that someone suggested to you, but
the name.
Yeah, but you are going all out. Like it's a small portion of your property, but you're going all out. As in you're even issuing news releases that are specifically about the Tellurium market and not specifically about the company and stuff like that. So,
of course,
how do you see that adding value to the story? Is it adding value?
That's an easy question to answer. It adds value because it lets people know there's no one else in the world doing what we're doing. Our gold property could be very good, could be nice, but it's not going to be a 5 million ounce deposit. So that won't separate. No one will look and say, hey, I want a gold company. Oh, here's a nice little junior company with a smaller deposit. No, it's what sets us apart is we're the only one that has this critical metal. People know that. As a matter of fact, to put things in perspective, First Solar themselves, who are the biggest user of cadmium, cadmium in the world, they mentioned ourselves, and we were called Deerhorn Capital at the time. They mentioned us in 2012 at a conference in Cologne, Germany. So they're very well aware of it. They mentioned 4 potential suppliers down the road. There was a property in China, one in Mexico, one in Sweden, and ourselves in Canada. And they said at the conference, we don't trust China, we don't trust Mexico. So that leaves 2, Sweden and Canada. And then about a year and a half, maybe 2 years after that conference, the Swedish company sold all of their tellurium. I don't know to whom. I'm guessing First Solar, but I don't know that to be a fact. So that leaves for our property, the Deerhorn property, is the only one of the 4 that was left. And those aren't my words, Antonio. That's First Solar. So again, they're the one giving the credibility. And so what I do, as I mentioned, I'm not a geologist or an engineer, I'm just a businessman. So I like to surround myself with bright people. So you look at my advisory board, I've got 4 gentlemen that used to work for First Solar are on my advisory board. And the other fellow that came on my advisory board is the CEO of Phoenix Advanced Material, that's Phoenix with an F, F-E-N-I-X, who's partners with the University of British Columbia on this lithium tellurium battery. So I get both the solar panel side taken care of and now this new phenomenal battery side taken care of. So, I like to surround myself with bright people, and that's how we do things. So you look and say, okay, how being First Solar, what's the advantage? First Tellurium. Well, the advantage is that when people Google Tellurium, first the company they're going to see as a junior is First Tellurium. So if they have an interesting property, they call us up and say, hey, we got something interesting. We'd like to have a look at it. And that's how we got our second property, the Klondike property in Colorado, which is so high grade, it puts our Deerhorn property to shame. And our Deerhorn property is high grade, but nothing in comparison to Klondike. And then you go one step further and say, okay, it used to be owned by First Solar themselves. So the skeptics in the crowd will say, well, hold on a sec. If First Solar used to own it and now they're worried about supply of tellurium, why would they drop it? The property can't be any good. Because, you get the average investor that just wants something, wrapped up in a ball, quick. The answer is, boom, simple. No, it's not simple. Well, it is in this case, but there's no conspiracy theories. Sometimes you just have to be lucky, Antonio, and I've been very lucky in my career. So what happened is I've been told that First Solar started a worldwide expedition, a 3-year expedition looking for tellurium starting in 2006. And in North America alone, they looked at over 100 projects. And this Klondike property was the best that was available, obviously with the grades that they have. They're stunning. So they started an exploration program on it. And then in 2010 or 2011, at an annual general meeting, a couple of large investors stood up, and I've been told, stood up to the board of directors at the meeting and said, we think you're a bunch of hypocrites. You claim to be a quote unquote green company, but you're involved in the dirty world of mining. How do you square that circle? So shortly thereafter, the board of First Solar decided they would just continue to buy their tellurium off the market so that they could keep their chest puffed out and their chin held high that they're a green company. And they sold their Klondike property to their head of exploration, who formed the company with family and friends and bought it from First Solar. And he approached me originally, I'm guessing 5-6 years ago now, and said, what do you think of these grades? I said, oh, they're phenomenal. And wanted to do a deal, but the asking price was a little high. I said, no, I'm just a little junior company, but, best wishes to you. And then I guess almost 3 years ago now, he came back, said, are you interested? I said, sure, but what happened? I thought you were going to option. He said, well, we did our research, and you guys are basically the only game in town. I said, I kind of knew that. So make a long story short, we did a deal with that. And the grades are absolutely superior. They have some high-grade gold there as well, but the grades for tellurium are absolutely astounding. So we're sitting on 2 world-class properties, and I don't know too many juniors with a market cap of 10 million and sitting there saying that they're sitting on 2 world-class properties, regardless of what the mineral are, but we are. So we know what we have, and we expect that people that come to talk to us, formally or informally, understand what we have. And like I say, when the company is not desperate for cash, then people have to show up, with real money or real intentions, and we'll go from there. So to answer your question, by and large, I haven't talked to anyone specifically that I can talk about. Have people phone me up? Obviously. But my idea, Antonio, is that since you mentioned on the PEA, the preliminary economic assessment, that was done in only 20% of our known zone, that this year we're going to do a little bit more drilling on the gold, silver, tellurium, expand it a bit, and also put 4, 5, 6 holes into the copper just to show what we have, and then follow up next year with more aggressive drilling. But the copper might be the thing that gets us bought out, because everyone in the world is looking for copper porphyries. And I should mention for the audience that you mentioned we bought our own drill. And, for economic sake, it does that you have more control over your costs and so on, and flexibility. But I think it's important to mention to the people how we got the drill. And how we got the drill was that in last October, my chairman, Tony Fogarassi, who's a top geologist as well as top lawyer, and our qualified person, Dr. Lee Grote, a professor at University of British Columbia, renowned geologist worldwide. He also consults to the governments of Japan and India, so he's been known for years. Walked our property with the fellow that's going to be drilling our property this year, who wanted to go up and look for potential drill sites, water availability. And the driller has a business relationship with the group in Alaska. And he phoned them up and said, hey, I've looked at this copper porphyry. This is amazing. You should try and see if you can buy some shares in this company. Make a long story short, they want to do a private placement, but, not at the levels I thought was important. And then they contacted me in January and said, hey, we got a brand new drill that our driller happened to have built. I'm sitting here in Alaska. Would you like to buy it from us? And we'll give you a real good price for it on one condition. We want shares. We don't want cash. So I try to tell people, when someone else tells you how good your property is and are willing to take discount and only want shares because one of their trusted partners or business associate told them how good it was, that kind of says more than me getting on with you, say, oh, I got a wonderful property, this, that, and the other. If someone was real cash or real value was involved, they took a discount just so they could have shares in this property. So that says it all.
Let's talk about your property though, because I was wondering what part of the value of the Deerhorn property in BC is made up of tellurium.
Well, right now, I would say, based on the price of gold and silver, we're probably looking at 5 to 10% maximum as far as the actual value of the property. But as far as selling the property, I think it's going to be the major part of it, because people aren't going to line up to buy our gold. We're not going to be like, say, a 2, 3, 4 million ounce deposit. So people will line up for either our copper or the tellurium, right? Because the gold and silver can be sold on the market. That's not a big deal, and that doesn't separate us from everyone else. The tellurium does. So when you say what the value is, what will the cash component be? I don't know, but the value of what's going to put us over the finish line, in my opinion, is going to be either the tellurium or the copper. Now, the copper is a much bigger nut to crack, if you will, because it takes tens of millions of dollars of drilling and so on and so forth. So again, we know that all the big companies are out there looking. And, there's been a few copper discoveries not too far from us. So we feel comfortable about that, but we were moving ahead regardless of the copper. We were going ahead with the gold, silver, tellurium, which is a different zones on the other side of the mountain to the copper. But if the copper proves out, and again, if you're a copper company, Antonio, you say, okay, if First Tellurium drills half a dozen holes this year and it looks pretty good, and we're going to drill it more next year, do you wait 5 years to say, well, let's see if they keep drilling and drilling? You sit there and say, well, this looks pretty darn good. Let's get in there before someone else. So it's a great situation to be in. We control the drill. We got work going on as we speak. A bunch of PhD students and graduates are walking over our property doing soil sampling and rock sampling. Because as I mentioned on previous podcasts, that because we're up a mountain, up until recently, it's been covered in snow and ice all around. So now that Mother Nature is starting to get some global warming going, that the ice is melting, the snow is melting, so it's uncovering other potential minerals and mineral zones and all that. So we're saying, okay, let's find out what we have, and then probably mid-September, we're going to have an induced polarization company come in and give us a blueprint of what we're sitting on. Look down below and see how big this porphyry could be, or any other deposits we have on there. Because as you mentioned, we don't really talk about it too much. We have a very good looking tungsten zone on there that's very, very good. And moly, which we have not talked about at all. I don't think so in 13 years, because moly was not, the flavor of the month for so many years. Now it is. We think we have a potential phenomenal moly situation to the east of our property, that the river samples, water samples, I think it's either the 5th or the 7th highest moly in the history of British Columbia. So we have not done anything down there, and I can say, I don't think it's a secret. If you're a moly company and you sort of find out, you do your research, said, there's some interesting moly at Deerhorn, maybe we should talk to First Tellurium. A couple of people have not, but it's not on the top of our agenda now to find out what we have. But if you can imagine having so many minerals, and that's what I tell people, that one of the biggest obstacles I have, Antonio, is that you tell people what you have, and they say, no, it cannot be true. If they had so many minerals like they're saying, there's no way their market cap would be 10 million, it would be X, whatever the case is. And I just tell people that's exactly what it is. And that's how we sold our last company, is that, we had a market cap of around 15, 18, 20 million dollars. And, we're telling our story and what we have with graphite and with iron and so on and so forth. And finally took one brokerage firm in Toronto that looked at it and said, oh, you got what you have. And then boom, I think it was a year later, from market cap of 18 million to, might have been a year and a half, to like the 175 million sale. Nothing had changed. But people have started to say, okay, yeah, you have it. People are used to this junior companies not really telling the whole truth. And that's why I tell people, look, don't believe a word I say. Do not believe a word I say. Do your own due diligence. Check with the PEA yourself, done by independent engineers. Check to find out about Salmon Gold, that we're involved with Apple. I say, go on the Apple website and /, Salmon Gold, and you'll see, at least it was 5 years ago, it's probably still there, There's a picture of the apple in their salmon gold brochure. Centerfold is a picture of our First Nations partner, the 51% owner, overlooking the Yukon River in the Apple website. So again, it's not me saying it. And there's just so many things going on behind the scenes. Say this is who we are, and that's why we get ignored at times, because we're not out there screaming at mining shows like PDAC or whatever. Because I've learned from years ago when I was a young man that I could be beside someone that can yell much louder than me and tell more fanciful stories from me that the average retail investor doesn't have a clue. I said, for example, if I can tell you, Antonio's like, when the 43101 report came into fruition, I think it was like 2001 or 2002 after the Bre-X scandal, people thought that, this is great. There can be no funny business associated with the 43101. And I said to someone at the commission at the time, I said, look, you're just making it available for the less than honest guys just to use the 431 as a selling tool. And they said, well, how is that possible? So my example, I'll tell you, is that I think it was 2004. I was at the PDAC in Toronto, and the guy beside me was saying that they had a 43101 resource of 2 million ounces of gold. And he was absolutely correct. However, it was like, 2 billion tons of 0.0001 gram, whatever it was. So if you did your math, that equaled 2 million ounces of gold, but there was no hope in heck that it would ever be profitable, no chance at all. But he was allowed to do the calculation. And of course, retail investors come and buy or say, 2 million ounces of gold is only trading at 10 cents or 12. And that was it. So as I said to the person at the commission afterwards, this is getting abused. So that's why I tell people, don't believe a word. Go to the independents like Apple, go to the engineers that actually put down their qualifications. This is it, boom, and away you go.
I believe Teck used to own this this property though, right? How come they didn't see the potential that you
here? Thank you very much for asking me. Okay, because again, it's a logical question that people say, oh my God, if it was so good, why did Teck drop it? So I'm glad you brought it up. Again, it's better to be lucky than good. I'm very lucky. So what happened as a brief history of the property itself. The Deerhorn property was discovered in 1943 by the Canadian government looking for tungsten deposits for World War II armaments. So it was found as a high-grade tungsten. And then, of course, in 45, the war's over. No need to continue. But people saw gold and silver, and they tried to go into production in the 60s. And I'm not sure what happened with the low price of gold. But in 1972, and this is important for the viewers, especially those that aren't in Canada, 1972, British Columbia, the province where Deerhorn is, elected their first ever socialist government called the NDP. And one of the first things the new premier did was put a ban on mining in the Deerhorn property because it's right beside a provincial park. So his idea was to put the put the Deerhorn property into the provincial park next door. So it stayed in abeyance there for 3 years, and then he was turfed out. And for some reason, it stayed there for another 10 years until a right-wing government in the 80s looked around and said, well, this is nuts. This is obviously a very good mining potential. It's industrial land. It's not park-like, so we're going to take it out. And they put it up for tender. And the people that got the tender had to develop it into a mine. It wasn't just for exploration. So 5 companies bid on it, including Placer Dome, I'm sure everyone knows, Teck Corporation, and 3 others. Well, Teck won the bid in 1986 for $1 million, cost them to get the bid to develop the Deerhorn into a property. So they went and did some drilling, did some exploration work, even did the metallurgy. So, Antonio, I've got the answers to that metallurgy question, which is always one of the red flags that your property gets. So we know it's fine. And in 1989, they're ready to do more drilling. And then the NDP got reelected again. So the new guy got reelected, said, you know what, maybe we should put this property into the park next door. So Teck Corporation at that time said, you know what, it's a lovely little high-grade property. We're not going to spend any more time dealing with you guys in Victoria. Makes no sense. So they sold their claims to another group who then went to BC Supreme Court a couple of years later to get a ruling that this is an industrial area. It's not park-like. It should never be considered for the park, and that's what the courts rule. No, the Deerhorn is a park, is an industrial area. Will never go into the park. That was done. And then they sold it to another group who we optioned it from. But I tell people, I'm 100% certain that if Teck Corporation knew there was a chance of a copper porphyry 5 kilometers away, 8 kilometers away, I'm sure that they would have put up with the political stuff, because no one walks away from a copper porphyry. And again, when I say it's lucky, it's better to be lucky than good, Antonio, is the copper was originally discovered by accident. In 2012, after a drilling program that we did, our geologist went for a walk around the property, having a look, turned the corner, and sticking out of the ground was this bit of copper right there, because the glacier had melted, the snow had melted in that little area, and he took a sample and said, this is phenomenal. So we're following up on that now, and that's how we got it, is that it's better to be lucky than good.
Do you think you're going to have to redo the PEA, by the way, at some point? Because you said you're doing that now, but...
Well, we'll do either redo the PEA or perhaps do a feasibility study or something, because we might be doing 10,000 ton bulk sample, but we'll see what happens, because we don't have a lot of doubts as to what the veracity of our property is. It's, again, if for your viewers, again, I'm not a geologist, but before I put my money or my family money into it, I look for red flags. I tried to bring my son into my business, but he's smarter than me. He works for the local hydro company here, a couple of degrees. But I said, before you put your money, you look and say, okay, what are the potential red flags? So you look at the Deerhorn, the gold, silver, tellurium, because we didn't know about the copper, but I started putting my money into it. So it's, is it better to be open pit or underground? Well, open pit, obviously, the underground is costly. This is open pittable. All right, is it better to have high grade or low grade? Well, obviously high grade, which we have there. You look at our PEA, I think we averaged a little over 5 grams of gold per ton, not 0.5, 5 grams of gold per ton. I think it was like 155 or 159 grams silver, starting at surface, basically, within a couple of feet, right? Then, as I mentioned, the metallurgy was done. Okay, so we had the answer to that. And then you look at the environmental issues and First Nations issues. So environmentally, we're fortunate in the sense that the area was destroyed in the late 1950s by the Canadian and provincial governments, putting in the Camano power dam for the power plant for the Alcan smelter, and so they even reversed the flow of the rivers and so on and so forth. So trees, the area was whole decimated. Man-made lakes were put in there, so you can even see like big Douglas firs coming through the bottom of the lake, or the top of the lake. So it was destroyed. So anything we do as a small mining company will be like a drop in the bucket compared to the damage that was done. So there's no hunting, there's no fishing. So environmentally, we're fine there. And then First Nations, and I tell people, and this is how we plan things, Antonio. We don't just go, day by day, hey, well, does this make sense? It's how you plan to build a company, thinking that one day someone's going to knock on the door. I don't know, is it going to be later today? Is it going to be a month from now? A year from now? I don't know. But they're going to look for weaknesses, as I mentioned. So anyone that's interested, I shouldn't say interested, anyone says they're going to build a mine in British Columbia, you better have First Nations support. And anyone that doesn't take that seriously is not being serious about what they're doing. They just want to tout their stock and blow it off. But if you're serious about building a mine, you have to have great relations with the First Nations. So to that effect, my chairman of the board, Tony Fogarasi, I went to high school with Tony. Okay, there's an old saying in here in North America, I don't know if they have it in Europe, but so-and-so is the smartest guy in the room. Well, Tony's the smartest guy in the room. He graduated gold medalist of geology at University of British Columbia, which is a renowned mining school. Then he went and got his law degree, and then he went to London School of Economics and got another law degree. His background is he's not only a lawyer for natural resources, but more importantly, for the last 35 plus years, if he's not the #1 First Nations lawyer in British Columbia, he's in the top 2. He's represented either all of the First Nations themselves or represented the provincial government or the Canadian government dealing with them. So he's held in such high esteem, and it's because of him we understand how we have to proceed to get the confidence. But because he's held such high esteem, it gives us an automatic great starting point. So again, we don't just talk the talk, and Tony, because a lot of people talk the talk. For example, if you look at that PEA, preliminary economic assessment, you see that we talk about doing dry stacking. Okay, instead of the tailings pond, do dry stacking, which means there's no chance of having any problems with flows of tailing ponds, ruining rivers, and all that, which has happened in British Columbia. So yes, it's more expensive. Okay, but it's our way of showing to the First Nations. We don't just talk the talk. Here it is. We could go with a regular one and make more money, but our profit is, as you mentioned, on the PEA was 42% IRR after tax, and that's including this dry stacking method. Just goes to show, hey, look, money, the bottom line, money is not everything. You have to work with other people to make sure that they're not impacted negatively, and that's what we do. And because of that, this is why the other First Nations have reached out to get involved with Salmon Gold, if you will, like Chiona Metals, and other First Nations are making phone calls. Hey, we like how you operate. If you have time in the future, we have some ground up here that you might be interested in. Now, we don't have time to look at it now, Antony, but it's one of those things that people judge you. Don't just judge you over a week or a month. Tony's been doing this for 35 years, and we've been up there for a long time. So people say, okay, this is, if we have to do business with someone, this is who we like.
Let's okay. So in conclusion, you don't necessarily have to redo the PEA. Let's get through a couple of important things that I wanted to ask here, Tyrone. By the way, before our time runs out, how much money do you have right now?
Well, we prepaid I think half of the drilling. We've prepaid the geologists up there. We've got another payment to make for the IP survey. So right now we're about a little less than $200,000 cash, but we've got warrants coming due October, November, which could be a couple of $1 million. So there's a chance we'll have to do a small financing here because you can't anticipate for sure warrants are going to get done. But more than likely, as I mentioned, if we do it, I'm sure I'll be a major participant, as I always am.
Who else do you think is going to be a major participant in it? Who are you going to be raising money with?
Well, I just raise money through friends and family and friends of directors and all that right now because are you familiar with flow-through funds in Canada? Yes. And the tax advantages and all that? Okay, well, I've been approached by a few flow-through funds and I've had to delicately say, well, thank you very much, but I'm not really interested in that because I say I don't see the purpose of taking one step forward and then two steps back when they blow off their paper because whatever they pay on the flow-through price. With all the tax benefits, it's going to cost them for sure less than half and probably only a third of what they're putting in. So they don't have any incentive to hold their paper because they've got their tax advantages. So if anyone does flow through, generally it's myself and maybe a friend or something because I know I'm not going to kill my company. So when I look to do it, I don't look to raise 10 million at a time. Maybe $500,000 to $1 million this time, maybe. And then we figure we're pretty sure our results are going to speak for themselves, whether it be the gold, silver, tellurium, whether it be the copper zone, or maybe even the thermoelectric when that invention comes in. And we anticipate that there'll be money available to us, whether it's from financings or perhaps government assistance. As you mentioned, we're lobbyists with the government of Canada. That was done for a reason. And so, they want to help companies like ourselves with critical and green metals. And when you establish that you're the only one, and especially if the battery here at University of British Columbia gets into production, that's another feather in the cap for not only government of Canada, but the government of British Columbia. So, that's why we're sitting here in a pretty good situation, to say the least.
Well, but if you go for charity flow through, by the way, because fair point on flow through, it does happen sometimes when you don't know where the shares end up. If you go with charity flow through, well, that means that you're placing the shares with people you know are not going to short you after 4 months. Is that not an option to you?
The charity is an option, but right now, I've made a little bit of money, obviously, this year. I can use a tax break that doesn't involve charity. It's still a lot of advantages of the governments of British Columbia and Canada. So, I'd rather do it with the people I want. If they want something with charity, maybe we'll do that next year on a bigger amount. As I mentioned, that next year we plan on drilling a whole lot more this year. Hopefully, get a second drill up there because our window is limited to about 3.5 to 4 months maximum up the mountain. So next year, we'll be following up on the results of this year, especially in the copper. So we'll probably use a second drill if we can get it to help expedite that program. Whereas in Colorado, I've been told that you can go basically 12 months of the year, but we'll just get it down to be 9 and 10 months. So that'll sort of be an aftermath. We want to get the stuff in Canada done quick because of the small window that we have.
How much is your G&A going to be this year, and how do you see that going into next year? Are you going to be growing that or dropping that?
No, I don't imagine growing. It's possible if we hire some people, but our G&A is generally somewhere around less than 400, less than probably 350,000 Canadian.
Okay. So what, you don't take a big paycheck?
Pardon me?
So what, you don't take a big paycheck?
Well, not as big as my wife would like me to get, but it's the same as the situation with Quinto. Is that if you build something properly, as we figure we will, that our big payout will be if and when we get bought out or put into production, because we have enough shares and we'll be adding more shares, so that eventually that'll be worth something. And so I don't have a big operation. I got 2.5 people. My office is 2 suburbs south of Vancouver, because I don't want to pay for office space for $20,000 a month and 3 secretaries running around and 4 vice presidents. I'd rather put the money in the ground or do some of the other stuff that we're doing. So where other guys, as I mentioned, not only do they take nice salaries, but they don't really, in my opinion, they don't really invest with the shareholders. Not in the same theory. I mean, people all they do is check my insider report, right? As a matter of fact, as we speak today on the Tuesday, I bought some more this morning, and yesterday was a holiday in Canada. Bought a little bit last Friday, so maybe I'm really dumb. Just buy my own stock. It's real good.
Well, you're right. You don't sell shares. You've been buying. I did see that Lyle Allen has been selling some shares, though. What's that all about?
So Alan Schwabe,
Yeah.
Lyle Schwabe.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think he sold some shares. Well, basically, he doesn't get paid a director's fee, right? They have a responsibility. I'm not sure what the total dollar value was. I know he crossed some shares to himself, but as I say to people, look, when shareholders complain, say, hey, a director shouldn't sell. I said, well, first of all, he's not killing the market, but second of all, I said, okay, so if I pay him a monthly fee, then that's going to add to our G&A, right? And that which means less money going in, right? And if they're exercising options, it puts money in anyway. So I never prohibit anyone from selling, because they have a responsibility, as you know, liability. If there's a problem with the company, all directors have liability. So if I'm asking someone to come on and include yourselves in liability, but you don't get compensated, right? If we get into production or have royalties from the thermoelectric, then we can pay the people then a salary. But no, I don't know how many people work for free. If you know someone that's talented, wants to be a director with the potential liabilities of all junior companies, send them my way, right? But it doesn't happen. You're not going to get good people unless you compensate them.
Who else besides you and your family owns shares, by the way? Because you said 11-12% is you and your wife. Where's the rest of those shares?
In my family, you mean?
No, I mean outside
my son
of your
knows
family,
some,
besides you and your wife.
Oh, well, we have like 400 shareholders that have it, but probably my attorney, she's been with us forever. I think she's got about 1.5 million shares. My chairman, Tony Fogarati, is about 1.5 million shares. I might be under with him. A local businessman here, between him and his ex-wife and 3 daughters. Was it 4? 3 daughters. I think they got like 6 or 7 million shares. So there's not a lot of position outside of the main people, just people that are there before. And occasionally some people that some small financing last year thought it was a great story and this and that, but I think they may have got caught in the market. So I would go back to them to count on them to be supporters. But I never give enough to let anyone that's going to hurt my company, right? I can't stop someone from selling. You just say, okay, here you go. Here's what we're doing, and I'm buying, and go from there. But it's kind of interesting. Some rather large financiers, have sent stuff over to me, and they told me their minimum investment is X amount of millions of dollars. I said, well, can't help you there. I'm not diluting. I'd love to have you on board, but I'm not diluting, giving you 35 or 40% of my company for what? If this is my baby, if you will. It's like I know what we need to do to move it forward. And hey, I'm not getting any younger, right? I'm 63 now. I sold my last company. I was 48, and when I retired there, I said to my wife, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be mining because mining's too darn tough. And here we go. When you get spectacular properties like this thrown in your lap, you realize, okay, you're sitting on something really good, and if people understand the way it's going forward with green energy and so on. We have a couple minerals. Obviously, we're high grade silver property, which is big in green metals, and the tellurium is big, and copper is probably the greenest of all minerals. So we're in the right place at the right time, and I think while we down with all the rest of the juniors, it just takes more investors to say, okay, these guys are different. So I'm not going to tell them we're wonderful, we're wonderful. You'll figure it out. Do your research, you find out what we're sitting on, right?
All right. What else are you going to be spending money on this year then? You said no conferences, but I did see you participate in the Metals Investment Forum, so I assume you're doing a couple of them at least. You're going to Switzerland, if I'm not mistaken.
I haven't decided on Switzerland yet. I haven't decided because there's potential of having something major happen in November with the company, so I have to be here and make sure. But a couple of investors conference sponsored by the newsletter writer out of New York, Chen Lin, who people see on TV. I've done that 2 times with him, and the other one was by London or Lundin, New Orleans. So I'm not going to go to the ones in September, Vancouver, because we'll still be drilling and all that. I might do the one in November. But I've obviously been invited to things around the world. We'll see what happens, but I don't like spending shareholder money if I'm not going to get a big bang for it. So the conference I had with Switzerland by Zoom was pretty good. So I like to. I'm not one that enjoys spending a lot of money on the road. I don't like going to a lot of conferences because if guys want to have a beer and chat, we can do that somewhere else. It's like, so I take the red eyes when I can and get out when I can. And I don't go to a lot of these functions because it's just people patting themselves on the back, telling you how wonderful their properties are. It's like, okay.
I did see that you uplisted, by the way, earlier this year to the QB over-the-counter exchange in the US.
Yes.
Are you planning to get off the CSE in Canada, go to TSXV?
No, I prefer the CSE.
Why is that?
I've been on TSX many times. Well, very simple. The CSE allows you to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to get all of your board decisions or news releases, adjectives if you're raising money or you're doing a deal of property. You don't have to get it double checked, get approval from the TSX. Now I understand they might be changing a few things in TSC, but when I was with them, that was a rationale. Their thought was, okay, who are we to tell you? So that's why I go with the CSE, because they allow me to be an entrepreneur. Because as I mentioned, I'm not a geologist or an engineer. I just believe I can capitalize on the asset that's given to me. And how do you explain that to someone who might be more of an analytical type or an analyst that doesn't think the same way I do, right? So that's how I approach things.
Sure.
Because let's face it, I told you, if everyone thought like me, I wouldn't have these opportunities. Guys 10 years ago would have had these opportunities, or 20 years ago. So I understand I approach things differently. But it's been good for my shareholders, obviously, as my last deal said, and I believe this one will be as good, or certainly up there.
Well, I'll be following along, and we'll see where that gets you. Hopefully, you can do this again another time. I think the connection is breaking up a little bit, by the way, Tyrone, because I had troubles hearing your previous answer. So yeah, let's keep it to here. Thank you so much for investing your time in me today. I'll put up some of your contact information up on the screen right now if people want to go to your website or contact you and talk to you. So yeah, thanks so much for investing your time in me.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Cheers.